In this talk, I'm going to talk about two psychological states: internal considering and external considering, focusing primarily on internal considering. First, let me briefly explain what I mean when I say internal and external. In the work, as in life, reality, there is the internal and there is the external. There is that which happens outside of us in the world, events, happenings, the movement of matter, interactions with other people and so on. This can be considered to be external. And there is that which happens internally, within us, our emotional reactions, our opinions, our thoughts, our ideas, and so on. And it's of key importance to remember that only one of these areas can be controlled, namely the internal. We can't control what happens in the external world, because it happens. But we can control our internal reactions, judgments, and responses to it. So in the last talk, I spoke of identification, the act of identifying, wherein one is drawn into a pigeonholed form of consciousness. Their attention taken over solely by the it before them. Their entire being overtaken by this one thing. And if we are to remember ourselves, we mustn't identify. For in the words of Maurice Nicole, internal considering is a branch of identifying. In the previous talk, I gave some loose examples of things we commonly identify with: ideas, emotions, feelings, movements, analysis, ongoing things in the world. But hidden within these, there is once more a deeper lesson, which is of a common form. The lesson turns the problems and faults of man back upon himself. If we are to think of identification as only an external problem, we'd be gravely mistaken. It's easy to think of identification in such a way. It's easy to think that we're only identified with, say, watering the flowers or cooking dinner, driving the car, putting on our shoes, putting on our clothes, the external things in the external world. It's easy to think that that's the only way we identify, that we're taken over by these external things. But for man to truly learn to not identify, he must first learn not to be identified with himself. So one way in which man identifies with himself is internal considering, whereby he's thinking of what others think of him, how they treat him, what attitude they show towards him. And as one can see, what we believe others think of us, how we believe we are valued, is an internal consideration. We are given some data, some information from the external world. We're given these external happenings simply to process. And in believing we're undervalued by others, or that they think less of us than we expect, we become tormented, distrustful, hostile, and we expel immense amounts of energy in these internal considerations. In time, man begins to tally up such expectations from others. Something called in the work making accounts. Man feels and believes he is owed something, be it popularity, status, respect, material reward, simply greater recognition. He is owed. He develops a psychological logbook, and he refers to this logbook throughout all his interactions with others and throughout all his interactions with the world. So much so that he begins to find it difficult to communicate without somehow referencing what it is he is owed, his sufferings. To feel one is owed and yet feel as if one owes nothing themselves, this is a great psychological detriment. The work asks, what is it if something is so inclined, or someone is so inclined as to feel owed by others? What is it then to observe one's separate eyes in such occasions? Which eye or eyes is it that feel owed? And what do those eyes feel owed? And why do they feel owed? And most importantly, what are these eyes? Who are these eyes? Why are we allowing them to overtake us? overcome us. Identify. Why are we allowing these eyes to identify? Now, for a fuller description of internal considering, one must be able to separate their internal state from the external reality, as I said at the beginning. In the words of Nicole, once people can distinguish between their physical appearance and their inner states, they can begin work. There is that which obeys, the body, and there is that which commands, the psychology, the centers. Now, what is it in the work? To sing a song. To sing a song is a habitual record related to making accounts, to this psychological logbook, everything we're owed. There are multiple common and mechanical songs people sing. We've all heard them. We all probably sing them without realizing it. Such songs are about how our jobs are getting us down, how we're misunderstood, how really we're actually really nice and people don't recognize this and they should, how we're underappreciated, how we've missed all these opportunities in life, how all our successes and past glories have just been pushed under the rug and people haven't realized them, and so on. Songs which all emit the same real meaning, that everyone else is to blame. We're not to blame. The world is to blame. So why in the work is it of use to get rid of these songs, of these accounts? All these songs are about making accounts after all. Why should we get rid of them? They take up energy. They use up our energy. As you sing these songs, mentally referencing your logbook, your accounts, you pronounce with irony, with faux humour. You smile a false smile. In short, these songs are lies, and entering into them, you lie about yourself, and you stray from knowing yourself. If you can't get past your own songs, you can't observe. The aim is to change one's levels of being, and to change oneself. One can't remain what they are, and still change. One must sacrifice to be able to change. As I said before, there is that commands and there is that which obeys. And if you still believe that you're a unified man, you can't change. And if we look at these songs, the friendships and relations of machines are largely based off being able to sing the same songs. The same songs about complaining about work, how people are misunderstood, how people are very nice, how people had all these past glories. People love to sing the same songs, and people get on with the same people who sing the same songs. And in the same way that the devil loves company, and that laziness loves company, and that evil loves company, sleep too loves company. Songs are of a great comfort for those who are asleep, for they justify one thing: not working on yourself. They legitimize the belief in machines that it is the world that shall change around them, and one can somehow remain the same and yet change. This is the error of the man who believes himself to be unified. And yet these songs are not just songs within the external world. And here's something of key importance. They're not just audible to the external world. That is not the only place these songs are sung. That is not the only place where we audibly, externally indulge in these negative emotions, these negative songs. They're not only preached by men in states of disarray aloud to passing sympathizers out into the external world. These mechanical songs are often, perhaps more often than not, internal. An inner sadness or frustration, an inner feeling that one is owed, an inner complaint. More difficult to observe. The song never enters into the repetitions of the external world. It's never commonly understood externally as complaining, whining, self-justifying, arrogance, contempt, bitterness, and so on. In which case it would probably be far easier to see. It's very easy to see when someone's complaining or someone's bitter. But it's not always the case. These songs are more often than not, as I've said, entirely internal. Deeper self-observation then is needed to let the light in to uncover what has always been there, to make us more conscious of ourselves, to admit to an internal song we sing to ourselves daily, if not hourly. Something deep within us which justifies ourselves not working on ourselves and remaining a machine. The eyes that arise in company and the eyes that arise when one is alone can be quite different. The former, those eyes which arise in us when we're with company, are easier to observe, for one has the external means to observe them. The latter, observation of inner attention, the eyes that arise when one is alone, internally, are both an observation, but they also have to be a sincere admittance of separation. There are those eyes within us, those which are lazy, bitter, arrogant, owed, and so on. And as Nicole says, you must not think that you are necessarily in good company when you're alone, for these may be the songs you have heard the most, the ones you, or an I of yourself, have sung to yourself repetitively, over and over. To observe that within us which lies to us, and thus is a lie of one's self. You're sat alone. It's silent. Everything in the external world is perceivably perfectly fine. You are apparently content. And yet, as often happens, you're overcome with a sadness, a complaint, a whining, a worry, a fear, an anxiety, as if from nowhere. A distant, distant song from distant eyes, without content, with forgotten content. It needn't matter. The song of these eyes has drawn you into the habitual sadness of which you could never put your finger on. A song so far away and so common and so oversung that it seems completely part of yourself. And this is the time of decision. Do you indulge in the song as you always have done? Or do you make the effort to observe it and perhaps eventually, if needed, sacrifice such a suffering? If you're sincerely interested in these ideas, then please find information in the links below.